I have finally upgraded to a new computer that I built to replace my aging Athlon 2 PC, which I've been using for over 3 years by now. The new computer is spec'd with an Intel Core i5-4590 and then 16 gigabytes of memory, an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1050 Ti 4GB graphics card, a 128GB Samsung 830 SSD, and a 1TB Western Digital Blue hard drive. Whilst my new system is super awesome, however, it has a bit of a downside. The motherboard I use on this new computer does not have legacy PCIe slots anymore, though it has the legacy serial and parallel ports as pin headers, which is more important to me. This means I cannot use my CDR King TV tuner card, which I've been using as my main capture card to capture analog video from PlayStation 1s and the like. But since my new computer doesn't have PCIe slots for it anymore, I cannot use the card on it whatsoever. Originally, I was going to get a motherboard that has a PCI slot in it, a gigabyte motherboard that features the same B85 chipset as the one in the Asus motherboard I use in my new computer build. Unfortunately, that motherboard turned out defective because one of the pins in the processor socket were busted, so that motherboard was essentially unusable. Fortunately, I was able to get the motherboard replaced with the Asus motherboard free of charge because it was the only B85 based motherboard they had remaining in stock. And also the person who ran the computer store was pretty nice. So also I decided to pick up that board anyway because it had more memory slots than the gigabyte one, so I ended up favoring more memory over having a PCI slot. I tried using a PCIe TV tuner card, an AverMedia M791, which I got from eBay US for $10 US. Little did I know that that capture card, or TV tuner, whatever you call it, actually turned out to be rubbish, because not only was finding drivers for the damn thing a massive pain in the butt, that I've ended up installing fake scamware drivers that might have installed some malicious malware to my system, which annoyed me to no end, and it also wasted my time. Even if I managed to get the driver for the capture card, the captures using that card turned out to be absolute rubbish as well, because it is one heck of a stuttery mess, as if the capture card cannot capture a seamless 29.97 interlaced video stream, and also the interlaced fields tend to go all over the place when it's capturing low resolution or non-interlaced video, which makes it impossible for me to capture seamless 59.94 frames per second video captures from analog sources from devices like a Sony PlayStation, etc. So that capture card is useless. I don't know if using the official application made specifically for the capture card would make it perform any better, especially when it would have likely made use of the MPEG-2 encoder that the capture card comes with. But since this capture card was only ever included in OEM systems and was never sold as a standalone product, I could not find the application software for this capture card anywhere on the internet, so I will most likely never know. With PCIe capture cards out of the question, I decided to go back to my old PCI capture cards instead. But since I cannot install them onto my new computer due to the lack of PCI slots, I decided to reuse my old computer as a dedicated video capture system. The capture card that I'll be using will be the AverMedia M160, which I got a pair of for free from a Surplus store as they were going to throw it away. I had pretty decent experience working with these capture cards back when I used to use Windows XP as my main operating system, and the main reason why I stopped using it at some point was because when I moved on to Windows 7, I could not find any drivers for it that will work in Windows 7, so I ended up using the CDR King capture card as it has 64-bit drivers available for it. The capture card is based on a Conexant BT878 chipset, which a lot of capture cards from various brands and companies utilized during the late 90s to early to mid 2000s. The operating system I'll be using on the video capture system will be ArchLinux, because not only is it free as with most Linux distributions, and is also very lightweight unlike Windows, but it also comes with a driver that's compatible with pretty much any BT878 capture device, which includes the AverMedia M160 already built into the operating system. Installing ArchLinux is a bit tricky, and it requires prior experience to using Linux to begin with. Basically, when you boot the installation media of ArchLinux, it doesn't have a installer wizard that'll guide you to things like formatting and partitioning your drives, etc. It just literally throw you into the Linux command line, nothing more, nothing else. Basically, what you need to do to install ArchLinux in the command line is to simply partition your destination hard disk, format the partitions, mount the root partition, so that you can perform a pack strap install onto the fresh empty root partition. So basically, that's where the OS files or operating system files are installed to the hard disk. But it requires an internet connection to achieve it. And then you perform an arch.ch root to the fresh ArchLinux install that you've mounted, and then you install mandatory packages such as dhcpdcd, which is necessary to get internet working, so you can install additional packages when you boot from your hard disk install. And then this is also where I install the sudo package, so that I can perform root operations without having to be logged in as root, as I'll be creating my own username on this install. Also, at this phase, this is also where you create your user account and set up passwords, etc. Once that's done, you install the grub bootloader package, so that you can make a grub configuration file and install the grub bootloader onto the MBR of your destination hard disk, which is necessary to get your hard disk to boot. My old computer was initially spec'd with just 2 gigabytes of RAM and a 160 gigabyte Seagate hard drive and just onboard graphics, more specifically a 7000 series NVIDIA graphics chipset. This old computer originally had 8 gigabytes of RAM and an AMD Radeon R7 240, but I've moved the 8 gigabytes of RAM to my new computer. So yeah. The processor is an AMD Athlon 260 with a base clock of 3.2 gigahertz, which I've overclocked to 3.84 gigahertz, which is the highest that I can pull off without experiencing stability issues. Now that I have a bare ArchLinux install ready to use, I then proceeded to install the X Windows system packages and the proprietary NVIDIA graphics driver package, NVIDIA 304XX, which is compatible with the onboard graphics of my old computer's motherboard. This is one of the rare instances where you manually install a driver under Linux, because usually the drivers are built into the OS. For some reason, installing the driver package causes the Linux command line, when you don't have the X Windows system running, to run in 80 by 25 text mode rather than the usual SVGA graphics modes, usually native resolution. But when I upgraded to a different driver package, when I added in a discrete graphics card, the console terminal now runs at SVGA rather than the standard 80 by 25 mode. The window manager that I'll be installing for the X Windows system will be Window Maker, because not only is it one of the most stable and lightweight window managers available for Linux, but it also mimics the look and feel of the Next Step operating system used in Next Station computers, which is super awesome for retro computer junkies like me. Plus, it's a lot more practical than spending a fortune on a Next Station computer, as you can still run modern applications under it. Despite being based on a nearly 3-decade-old user interface, it is actually still very usable to work with today. In fact, I find Window Maker to be somewhat more flexible to work under than any other window manager that I've used so far, and also Windows, such as the ability to drag a window anywhere you click while holding Alt, so you don't have to reach for the title bar to be able to move a window aside. The shade and unshading of windows, where you basically double click the title bar to basically minimize it, but not to its taskbar. It has no taskbar, but basically it folds the window up to just have it only its title bar, and double clicking it will unfold it or unshade it. The icons on the right of the screen is the dock, and is more or less where you stick application icons to as shortcuts. If you've used Mac OS before, that might sound familiar to you. Well, that's because Mac OS's user interface evolved from Next Steps, which explains the similarities. The icon on the left of the screen is the clip, and it has little arrows you can click to switch between workspaces. Running an application that hasn't been put to the dock or clip will spawn its own icon, which is not to be confused with the icon when you minimize or iconify an application. You can snap that icon to the dock and it'll work as a shortcut afterwards, and app icons that don't have a running instance will show 3 dots. Double clicking an icon while the app is running will bring up all instances of the program. You can also add drawers to the dock, which basically act as foldable directories, allowing you to store app icons or dock apps into it by simply snapping an icon to the side of the drawer icon. The clip also acts like the dock, but app icons snapped to the clip will only appear on a workspace you snap the icon on, so you can isolate app icons to specific workspaces. While most applications are compatible with Window Maker's conventions, some applications such as Krita would not display its icon on its app icon, though it can easily be remedied by specifying your own icon image to the app icon settings when docked. There are also some applications such as Chromium which will not spawn an app icon at all, though it can easily be fixed by simply changing some window attributes to get it to spawn its app icon. While I was fumbling about and setting up stuff to turn this computer into a video capture system, unfortunately the monitor that I use as my main developed a dead scanline while I was working, which is a shame and a massive bummer to me, because I really like that monitor, especially with its analog composite and S-video inputs, which is unusual to find on a relatively high-end computer monitor. The dead scanline eventually became too annoying for me to tolerate, so I traded it to my dad for his LG Flatron Wide, which is a 1680 by 1050 display, 16 by 10 aspect ratio, but it doesn't have the analog composite and S-video inputs, of course. During the editing of this video, that monitor eventually developed additional scan lines. Now it has 3 dead scan lines. I guess that monitor is slowly on its way out. I then installed OBS, but as it turns out, it requires a graphics card that supports at least OpenGL 3.1, which my onboard graphics does not support. I threw in NVIDIA GeForce 9500 GT into the computer to get around that, changed driver packages, and got it working. It's not a very powerful video card. In fact, it's probably weaker than the infamous GeForce 210, but it does provide some pretty decent hardware video decoding, allowing me to watch high definition videos at 60 frames per second on YouTube without much processor load. There seems to be support for hardware video encoding on the graphics card, but it doesn't seem to work because OBS throws an error whenever I try to record with the hardware NVIDIA encoder set as the video encoder. With a new video card installed, OBS finally works. I then added a video capture device to the sources list, and at first I got just fuzzy video as if it's picking up from the TV tuner without any channels being picked up. But after a bit of fumbling, I finally got video from my PlayStation, though it was capturing at 320 by 240 instead of a full 720 by 480. But OBS doesn't seem to have any options for changing the video capture resolution. I've done a bit of research and some fumbling about. I use the command v4l2ctl to set a capture resolution to my video capture card, and I finally got 720 by 480 capture resolution. At this point, this is where I removed one of the capture cards to make it easier for me to use the v4l2ctl command line program to configure the capture cards. I then set a retro deinterlacer to the video capture source, which basically doubles the size of the interlace field, so you get from 480i to 240p at double the frame rate. It works best on consoles that output non-interlaced or low-resolution video, but it will result to a flickery video if you're recording from a high-res source. Initially, I got a stuttery, not quite 60 FPS capture, but when I turned off buffering on the video capture settings, I finally got perfect 60 frames per second from analog video sources. I wanted to show you examples of what the recordings turned out, but since this video is shot at 50 FPS and conversion from 60 FPS to 50 FPS would most likely ruin the smoothness of the captures, I'm going to have to upload the sample recordings onto a separate video, which you'll find the link of on the upper right corner of the video right about now. Anyway, I finally got the facility to capture analog video at buttery smooth 59.94 deinterlaced format, which is something that I cannot do very easily or properly with that crappy AverMedia card I bought. Later down the line, I've experienced a hard drive issue, which got so bad that the hard disk would become unbootable. I eventually managed to get it to boot again, and I quickly transferred the entire system into another hard disk, a 250 gig Seagate this time. I even experienced read errors during the copy process, but fortunately none of them were major files whatsoever. I also experienced a power cord that almost caught on fire. I thought the power supply in my video capture system failed because this cable didn't work on that, but it worked fine on my other computer. Little did I know that there was actually a loose contact in that cable that led to this. Later on, I gave the computer a new case because not only was the old case looking like as if it came directly from the scrap heap, but also it's a bit too big and bulky for my liking for a computer that can be fitted in a micro ATX case no problem. I also wanted my video capture system to be in a small form factor as much as possible, so I can easily lug this around and set it up whenever I need to do a video capture session or a stream of one of my game consoles. The case is just your typical generic no-name case from Chinaland, but this one is a bit unique because it seems to be built in a higher quality standard, because I don't feel any razor sharp edges that super cheap cases tend to have. Also, the build quality is pretty sturdy for a cheap case. I only paid 800 pesos for this case without the power supply because I don't want to spend too much money on recasing my old computer. I didn't bother to transfer the DVD drive from the old case because it's pretty faulty anyway. It tends to not detect discs properly, so why bother? Oh, and those SD card slots on the front, well, they're just holes. There's nothing behind there. I think there would be a variant of this case that has the built-in micro SD card reader installed, but mine doesn't have that. I'm trying out a new video editing style in this video, but I'm not sure if it is an improvement from my usual format. I feel this video turned out a bit rushed or slapdash put together, but I'm not sure what you guys think about it. Let me know if you want to comment on that. And I also plan on doing other things with the video capture system that I put together. Basically using it as a computer to tinker with Linux stuff on it from time to time. To see how viable Linux is to me as an operating system to use as a daily driver. So I've actually tried doing some productive things on it, such as drawing some artwork using Krita with my Wacom Intuos tablet, which actually performed quite well under Linux. I also tried doing video editing on it using Kdenlive, and it also performs pretty well as well. Though the computer is obviously a bit underpowered when it comes to dealing with 1080p 50 FPS. In fact, half of this video was actually edited on this very computer, and it was a bit laggy because, like I said, it's a bit underpowered. But it can handle 720p 60 FPS video no problem, and I think you would have your mileage will be a bit better if you're dealing with a 1080p 30 FPS on it. So you could get better results if you have a more powerful computer. I also tried doing some gaming on it. First, a couple of open source titles that are available in the ArchLinux repository. And then I also installed Steam and played some Steam games on it that are compatible under Linux, such as Freedom Planet and Undertale of all games. Gaming is actually pretty decent under Linux, to be honest. The only downside is just the titles. Most games are, as of now, simply don't have Linux versions. I can even do some live streaming on the computer as well using OBS, though I can only do 720p 60 FPS on it with the specs of my computer, and using bilinear filtering for everything. Though you could obviously do much better if you have a more powerful CPU. I also done a couple of upgrades, and I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned in the video, but I've upgraded the memory of the computer to 4 gigabytes, and I've replaced the graphics card from an NVIDIA GeForce G9500 GT to an AMD Radeon R7240, which was the graphics card that I was using on the computer before I moved on to my new computer and bought a 1050 Ti. The only major issue that I've experienced with Linux was when I prepared this computer for live streaming in last week's last Sunday live stream, which I cancelled because power failure occurred just as I was about to officially begin the stream, where I basically stream a bunch of PlayStation Homebrew titles. But the major issue that I've experienced with Linux was the Pulse Audio sound system, because apparently it could not record from multiple audio input jacks on the same audio device whatsoever, which means that if I want to record gameplay audio from my PS1 through the line in, and then record my voiceover through the microphone input of the same on the onboard sound, I cannot do that. I can only get input from either the line in or the microphone, which is wow. Which means literally, in order for you to be able to capture from more than one audio input device, you need to literally have a second sound card or have an audio mixer. It's wow, I cannot even find any information on how to get around that. Basically, you cannot mix multiple audio inputs on the same audio device whatsoever. So if you have a sound card that has multiple audio inputs, well, you're SOL, because you can only use one of those audio inputs at a time. This would be less problematic if I'm working with USB microphones, but I'm not using any. I don't have any USB microphones, and I don't even have USB audio input devices or sound cards to boot. So yeah, it's a major annoyance. That's actually exactly what I did. I actually added a Sound Blaster Live, which is the only sound card I had lying around that will work under Linux. When I prepared this computer for live streaming, only to find out that I had to cancel the stream because of a power failure. Wow, it's as if the Pulse Audio developers never considered recording from multiple audio jacks. I cannot wrap my brain around as to why they went with that. It's infuriating. Speaking of live streams, I most likely won't be doing any for a long while from here on out. Mainly because it's just simply not worth it to me. Especially when it takes a lot of effort for me to prepare a stream and perform it. It's just not really worth it to do it when I have a very small fan base, to be frank. It just feels lonely to do a live stream only to find out that only 1 or 2 people are watching. Not that I'm complaining that I have a very small fan base. I'm just stating facts, and I'm not belittling anyone who didn't watch my streams. I understand that everyone has their own personal thing, and not everyone has the time to watch my streams. Well, I guess that's pretty much it for this video, and I hope you enjoyed watching it anyway. And if you want, leave a like, comment, or share this video if you don't mind. As always, thanks for watching. I'm Guy64 signing out, and have a good day.